Roads. Let's say good day to Ryan Hockensmith of ESPN, the magazine. He oversaw the NFL Confidential survey. And we also welcome somebody you know from his political polling and messaging. But Frank Luntz has also worked with the National Football League, speaking with players and league officials about this issue. We also say good day on the phone to Warren Moon, a 17-year NFL veteran and a proud member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It is good to have you all here. Warren, I want to get your quick blush first impressions to some of the numbers you just heard. There seems to be some denial here. For example, 3 concussions suffered, these players told us, but they'll only report on average 1 of every 3.
Yeah, that's one of the big problems, Bob, is trying to protect the players against themselves. And I think knowledge is going to have to be and education is going to have to be the thing that really gets across to these players how severe and how important concussions are to their life, not only right now, but later on after their football days are over. I've learned so much about concussions since my playing days have been over. I was diagnosed with 6 concussions throughout my career, and I don't know how many other times I was dinged and really didn't know exactly where I was for a little bit and still got my senses back and stayed in the football game. So even myself, protecting myself from myself was something that was tough to do because you have that gladiator mentality as a football player, and you don't want to come out of the football game under any circumstances unless you can't walk. So I think a lot of these players have to understand just what the ramifications are of having a concussion. Knowing that the next time you get one is a lot easier, knowing that the long-term effects are there because there's so much more information, there's so much more research that has been done on concussions. These players need to have all of this information and possibly even see some of these players that are suffering from what happened with head injuries throughout their career just to see what they could actually look like and how it could affect their lives later on before they really
information being given. Ryan, let me ask you, you conducted many of these interviews, and give us an idea, 4 dozen players. These were personal for the most part conversations or phone conversations. The scope of teams represented, the kinds of players, and the things that you heard that just aren't represented in numbers.
Yeah, right. I mean, we talked to 48 guys from 23 different teams, and, you know, they understand exactly what Warren said, but their opinion is, you know, we know about concussions, we're worried about concussions, but this is what I do for a living. I am not always going to tell the truth if I'm asked. If I feel like I, am seeing stars or have my bell rung, those are phrases you hear a lot from players.
There's fear.
There is fear of that. However, they all admit they are part of the problem. You know, most of these guys, when they answer, they say, yes, I get it, I get it, I get it, but this is how I make a living, and I do not want to come out of games. I do not want a reputation as someone that has had a concussion or multiple concussions. And lots of guys say, hey, this is how I do, this is my job, and I do not want to hurt myself down the road as far as earning power, and it's their living, and that's what they sort of throw their hands up and admit we are a part of the problem.
Well, you've colored in some of the shading. Frank Luntz, it's good to have you here. I guess the first question is, what is a guy who makes his living in the political field and is a great message guy, after I think you're the guy who made death tax part of the political lexicon. What is your role with the NFL in all of this?
Well, actually, you mentioned that I'm trying to help these players not have to pay as much in taxes at the end of the season. I follow public opinion, and I follow public trends. And what's interesting about this discussion is I think that the NFL deserves significant credit for raising the issue, for being willing to focus on it. Commissioner Goodell has spent a significant amount of his time over the last several years drawing attention to the equipment improvements, drawing attention to the rule enforcements, these specific areas that'll make a difference in the health and safety of the players. And I'll tell you 2 things that I found in the research I've done. Number 1 is that football fans want to protect the integrity of the game. And number 2, they want to ensure that people like Walter Moon have the longest possible careers because they really love these players and they want to see them play on the field for a longer time and then have a good life afterward. And so this whole conversation we're having is a very positive one for the long-term impact of the NFL.
But Frank, as a man who helps to shape messages and works with image and also does the research, potentially how big an issue is this in public perception and a problem for the NFL?
It's a significant issue, and I actually think that the numbers are going to get even more challenging for the NFL as more people come to realize these safety issues. But it's a legitimate concern, and it has to be dealt with in real specific ways. You've got to look at the equipment and use the most advanced, scientifically sound equipment possible. You've got to, as Walter Moon said, teach these players personal responsibility and accountability, that in the end they can't play this game and blame the NFL when they know that they're playing hurt, they know that they're playing and they shouldn't be. Well, look, we all have a role to play in addressing this issue, and it has to be done now so that these players don't play on average for 3.9 years, that they can have longer and more fruitful careers, and fans can enjoy their favorite players on the field for a longer period.
Warren Moon, what about the ethic in the league, though? And Ryan mentioned it in some of his conversations with some of the players. I don't want that in my medical jacket. And we know that, okay, it's getting a little bit more improved with some guaranteed contracts, but for the most part, it is a week-to-week paycheck in the National Football League. Describe that ethic for someone who may not be a star quarterback, but is just trying to stay on that 53-man roster and make 16 game checks.
Yeah, I think that's the pressure that most players, that they don't want to come off that field under any circumstances, because they know there are players waiting right behind them to try and take their jobs, and they feel like if they come off the field just because they got a little bit dizzy and they can still run and do all the things that they're capable of doing as a player, that they're going to be looked at maybe as not being a tough guy if they come off the field for something like that. So a lot of players tend not to come off the football field when they probably should, and I think a lot of that has to do with whether they're allowed to go back on the field. I think the league is doing a much better job of when they do know a player does have some type of head injury or some type of concussion, they're not letting those guys go back on the field. They have a great protocol that they go through before they'll even let them go back out to practice the next week or even the next week's game. So the league is trying to do what they possibly can to protect these players, but the players, like I said earlier, have to try and protect themselves, and that's a tough line to cross, because again, you're talking about your livelihood, you're talking about something you've always wanted to do from the time you were a little kid, and you don't want to do anything to jeopardize that opportunity. So that's what these players are dealing with week in and week out.
Ryan, how much of a sense did you get in your conversations with these 48 surveyed players that they were willing to give credit to the league for what has gone down basically on Roger Goodell's watch here?
Yeah, I mean, you see the grades for Roger Goodell. They generally like Roger Goodell. I mean, you saw it at the draft. The rookies are hugging him, and it sounded like a lot of the veterans we spoke to would give him hugs too. But one of the key statistics we ended up with our 48 that we talked to was 57% of guys said football is as safe as it will get. So there's a large number of guys that we talked to that said this is a violent game. It comes with the territory. We all know that. There is some frustration. Have players voiced to us that they didn't feel like they have known as much as the NFL about concussions over the years? That was one thing that popped up a lot. But at the end of the day, a lot of these, this comes with the territory. This is my profession, and it involves serious blows to my head.
Frank, what else can the league do in getting its message to frame it in its best possible light, to get that out there as the season's about to start? What would your advice be to them?
My advice would be to bring in the best scientists and medical professionals and let them examine the evidence and present that evidence to as many players as is willing to listen. Second, I would go to those professions. An example might be the military, to learn from the challenges that they have faced with head injuries and learn from what they're going through and apply that to the players. And third is to embrace this concept of enforcement of the rules, because when you get enforcement, when you get officiating that doesn't allow some of these illegal hits, that in itself will protect defenseless players and make a difference in the quality of play on the field. All three of those the NFL not only should be doing, but I believe is doing at the current moment.
All right, Frank Luntz, it's a busy year, election year. Thank you for your time on a different topic, but one, of course, that you've been engaged in. Warren Moon, you've got a game to call this evening in Kansas City with Seattle. Good luck for that. Ryan, stand by.